Okay. Well, welcome to our class this afternoon. And I hope you can hear with the rain pouring down outside. It's certainly heavy at the moment. I hope it just lightens off in a little while or stops. We really need it to stop, don't we? Okay, it's good to see you. And today we're going to talk to you about depression, but I'll just run through our programs that we've had earlier in this year. You know, most of you came to the very start, the early programs which we ran in, was right back in February. Poultices Part 1, Poultices Part 2, Hydrotherapy and Herbal Health. Then I took you through the 8 laws of health, and I taught you what's the best diet to eat. And it's a whole food, what I believe anyhow, whole food plant-based diet. Then I went on to the China study. We talked about the advantage that vegetarians have. We went on to the fungal disease link. We went on to excitotoxins, all those chemicals, those flavourings that are added into your food, which I hope you're looking for when you're going shopping and see all those labels which says natural flavourings, and you know that they're not at all good for you. They're quite harmful for you. The gut-brain connection. We talked about electrosmog, how EMFs affect us. We talk about altered foods, about modern wheat, genetically modified organisms, and glyphosate, what effect that has on our health. We talked about how we're bombarded. Our life is just being bombarded with so many things today. We've got no hope. But I should say we have a hope. But it would seem sometimes that there's very, very difficult to avoid what's we're being bombarded with. Then I showed you and I introduced you to making MMS or CDS, which I hope that you've made it, and you need to use it because it is invaluable. Kills your viruses, your fungus, your parasites, and it even detoxes you from heavy metals. So there's lots and lots of things there that you can use CDS for. I showed you how to do wet sheet pack hydrotherapy. That is something, and I know that you've got it all stored in your mind, but do you know that that is the best way to detox anyone? You're taking people off cigarettes, you're taking people off hard drugs, you're taking them off anything. They can just quickly recover if you do a wet sheet pack. I talked to you about some essential minerals we needed in our body. We went through borax, we went through iodine, we went through magnesium and sulfur, MSM. Last week, and this is a hard one, I know some of the people, when last meeting we did feelings buried alive never die, and I know that some people realise that there's stuff still buried down deep inside of us, and yet we want to be well, we need to get rid of all those. And today's talk is going to be called on depression and its causes, or helping depression. We can call it, but basically it's how do we help people who have depression, or we have depression itself. And I'm going to share this with you because this is based on Dr. Neil Nedley's book, which I've got here, a picture of it here, Depression, the Way Out. And this is the book here. If anyone would like to come and have a look through mine and just see if you'd like to purchase it, I believe it's an excellent book. Dr. Nedley is an American doctor, but he was an internalist, internal medicine, and he realised so many of his patients were coming to him and they were depressed. So what he decided to do was see if he could find out a common denominator, and he found over 100 causes for depression. So what he's done is categorized them, and now he has Depression, the Way Out, a course. You can do a course, you can do it either online. I checked out, it's still online, so if you wanted to do it in the comfort of your home, it's like $175 American, which runs into probably about $220 or something Australian. But can I tell you, you can also do it. The church here does periodically, they do depression recovery seminars through it. And I believe it is one of the best programs to do if you have depression, because what it does is gets you involved. It's all right for you to sit back and listen to and hear the information, but when you're doing a depression recovery seminar yourself, you're investing time, you're investing energy into it. I think it's about 8 or 9 weeks, possibly 9 weeks. Yeah, okay, they're just finishing one. They're going, but they come and go. They're running them all the time. Probably won't have another one this year. But this is gleaned the information from that depression recovery seminar. Now, Dr. Nedley says that when he does a program, he says he has 99% of people believe they are helped. After the course, he has a live-in course. After the course, he says 54% of the people have no depression. And after 3 months, he checks them again, and he said they all have even more significant increases. So what it is, but you have to implement them. It's all right to learn about these things. You have to implement them in your life. Okay, so let's just look about it, because everywhere we realise there is so much depression happening out there in the world. It's rapidly increasing. There's more fun things to do, yet more depression. 1 in 5 Australians aged between 16 and 85 experience a mental illness in any year. I believe would be much, much more, because this statistic hasn't taken COVID into consideration, and we know there are so many more people affected because of the situation that we've been exposed to with COVID. But yet we know there is a depression epidemic. Most common are phobias and depression, followed by anxiety and substance use disorder. Interestingly enough, it is twice as common in women, and it's estimated that 1 in 4 young Australians experience it. "65% of people do not access any treatment." It's true. You stop and think, if you yourself suffered a little bit of depression, you probably just try to manage it yourself and try to get over it. But it is important we do something to face it. Suicide is leading cause of death in 15 to 24 age group bracket. Something is definitely happening in the world. What has happened? Prenatal and perinatal depression. Depression diagnosed from pregnancy to child's first birthday. 1 in 5 mothers of toddlers have been diagnosed with depression. More common in mothers under 25, smokers, lower income families, spoke English at home, were overweight or obese, and had emergency caesarean section. Do you know what? I can remember back when I had my babies, I can't remember anybody talking about any prenatal depression. It was rare if it was then, if it happened, but something is happening. Prognosis, because each generation it seems to get worse. An estimated 1 out of 2 young people will suffer depression in their generation. Each successive generation has more depression than previous generations, and most are aware of it and many are undiagnosed. So what we're facing now is more than we had 1 generation ago, and then 2 generations ago, and then 3 generations ago. But let's just think, depression is not, because some of us, not everything is clinically diagnosed as depression. I mean, you can have problems, you have trauma, you have loss of job, you have sickness, you have death, you have disappointments, you have arguments, you have rejection. You can just have an off day. Not everything is classified as depression. And they're not true depression. But Dr. Nedley discovered there are 9 symptoms associated with major depression. A person who experienced at least 5 of the 9 symptoms for at least 2 weeks have major depression. A person who experiences at least 2 to 4 of the depressions for at least 2 weeks has minor depression. So we're going to look at all of those symptoms that are associated with major depression. So just remember, if you've got 5 of the 9, you have 5 or more of the 9, you have major depression. If you have maybe 2 to 4, you've got minor depression. Now, the very first symptom of depression is a deep sadness or an emptiness. Most every day, they feel sad. They've become fearful without obvious cause. Children or adolescents may feel irritable, but not everyone feels a deep sadness. But not everyone who cries is depressed. So we obviously know there are some different factors in there. But basically, people will feel a deep sadness or an emptiness if they're depressed. That's the first symptom. The next symptom is apathy. They have diminished pleasure in almost all their activities. They're fun things that is no longer enjoyable. Motivation is decreased significantly, and they don't even feel like getting up. Have you ever found that out? People who are going through depression, you can't even get them up out of bed in the morning. They're just lying in bed. They're sleeping, or they just want to opt out. The third symptom of depression is agitation or restlessness. People become more irritable. And it's interesting that people notice that they move much slower. They're not quite as quick as they used to be. And people can't recognise this in themselves, but other people can see it in them. But they become agitated or they become restless. Then they have sleep disturbances. They waken early in the morning and they can't get back to sleep. And they could suffer from bouts of insomnia. Or they suffer from hypersomnia as they sleep all the day. So you've got both options there. You've got somebody who can't sleep and somebody who wants to sleep all the time. So they have sleep disturbances. So that's another one. Then we have weight, appetite disturbances. They self-medicate with food. And you know that how people do this. They use food for comfort, chocolate, soft drinks, ice cream, all those comfort foods. And chocolate, I believe, is the number one comfort food that people reach for. Or any sugars. That they want that dopamine rush to the body. They can lose weight rapidly, or they could become anorexic. Well, it's certainly raining now, isn't it? Can you hear it? Okay. So we've got the options. We've got the 2 groups of people. We've got some who just lose their weight and some who put it on. But it's an appetite disturbances, weight disturbances. Then we have a lack of concentration. People can't think straight. You can't think clearly. And it's most notable in brain workers or students. And even in mundane decisions. People, they can't even decide what they're going to eat. Something simple. Yet they lose their ability to just make such simple decisions. Number 7 is feelings of excessive guilt or worthlessness. They feel no use to any other person. They have excessive or inappropriate guilt. And we must understand not all guilt is wrong. God allows us to feel guilty so we can correct our ways and return to Him. There is good guilt, if you understand, if we can call it good guilt. But this is an excessive or inappropriate. They're guilty about the most mundane things, which we should never be guilty about. So this is excessive guilt or worthlessness. They feel worthless. They feel they're no good for anybody. Now, the next one is morbid thoughts. They're preoccupied with death or dying. They're preoccupied with symbols of death, for example, skeletons and tattoos. Now, you stop and think of our society that we're living in now. How many people are preoccupied with skeletons and death? That picture on there that is on the screen. Somebody has got this on their leg, a big skeleton. Recurrent thoughts about suicide. So this is just excessive. And the last one is they feel tired. They're fatigued. They're tired all the time. They lack energy. And people, you can have fatigue without being depressed, but depression can be an underlying cause. Now let's just go back over them again. Remember, if you have 5 to 9, you feel major depression. 2 to 4, you will be suffering minor depression. So you can see them there. Okay, now, but there are more underlying causes of depression. We have a stroke. People can get depressed if they've had a stroke, which is a build-up of plaque in the arteries supplying blood to the brain. They haven't got enough blood flow to the brain. Their heart disease is another underlying cause of depression. Depression affects the heart rhythms and increases the risk of dying within 2 years by 150%. Cancer, the depressed have 2 times the risk of getting cancer. And pneumonia, this seriously complicates pneumonia. So there are other underlying causes of depression that we're not addressing here. But let's look at some of the effects of depression. It shrinks the hippocampus, which is your learning and your memory. And I don't know about you, but none of us, I'm sure, would like to have that shrunk in us, because we don't have the ability to think and learn as we used to. It increases stress hormones. Then we've got osteoporosis, increases osteoporosis risk, hypertension or your blood pressure, asthma, headache, physical disability, possible increase of seizures, infertility, decrease in sex hormone levels, and difficulty controlling blood sugar in diabetics. So these are the effects that it's going to have on people, the physical effects. But now we're going to go on to 10 hit categories of possible causes of depression. As I said, when Dr. Nedley went and he tried to work out all the causes, he found over 100 causes of depression. But he decided to categorize them, and so he put them into 10 categories. He called them hits. Okay, we're going to look at all of these in detail. So what are the 10 hit categories? Because once again, the brain can often sustain hits or categories or causes in 3 hit categories and still function well. Once the 4th hit category is sustained, depression or another mental order will likely result. So what we're trying to teach you here today, there is some that you will never get rid of, some of the hit categories that you may never get rid of. But what you can do is try to minimize those that you've got control over. For instance, the very first one is genetic. If you have a family history of depression or suicide, you automatically have this one as a hit. But genetics can set the stage for depression, but inherited roots are not sufficient to cause depression. So your mother or your father or your whoever committed suicide, that is setting you up for depression. Or you've got somebody you know, very close in your family. Yes, especially your blood ones. Yes, it's going to be your brother or your sister also can affect you, but family history of depression or suicide will affect you. Now, the next one is developmental, not being raised by both biological parents. History of depression in adolescence. Severe sexual abuse. Now, that plays havoc with people, men and women, if they have been sexually abused when they were young. History of alcohol or illicit drug use as a teen. Nutritional development, what the child was fed when it was very young. Because did you know that it's very interesting, if you feed a young girl high protein diet when they're in the ages between 3 and 5, they're going to mature very rapidly. And we know, and Dr. Dudley is saying that when young children have had this high protein diet early in their life, and they develop and they reach puberty far too early, it sets them up for depression. I can still remember one of the girls I was teaching, she was 7 and she was menstruating. Now, she was only, 7-year-olds, that's a grade 2, isn't it, I think? 2. And yet she was still playing in the little kindy section of the playground, but she was like this much taller than the rest of her classmates. She was so mature looking, and she was 7 years old, and she had her periods. That sort of scenario sets up some child, when they're growing up, they will probably develop, or they could very easily go into depression. This is one of them reasons. Now, we can't change our genes or our development, but we can modify other hits. Depression can be cured within 5 months or less. And as I said, Dr. Nedley, he's got such a high success rate that I just believe, and I know that this program it covers all the different areas. I don't believe any other program could come near what this one does. So you've got genes and you've got developmental. As I said, some people have got those too for a start, and they're just set up for it. So they've got to try to eliminate as many of the others factors as they can. Now, nutrition has a profound effect on our metabolism. There are many interrelationships between the food we eat and our risk of depression. And our body needs raw materials to function. And most people, and especially if they're depressed, they're not eating properly. They're not giving themselves the right material, the right raw foods or the right foods to replenish and restore everything in their body. We also need to be hydrated. Many, many, many depressed patients are dehydrated. That's probably one of the first things that you need to look at. Are you drinking enough water? You need to be drinking at least 2 litres of water a day. That's critical. But toxic food creates toxic thoughts. Now, serotonin is a neurotransmitter, and it's a chemical that helps relay signals from one area of the brain to the other. Although serotonin is manufactured in the brain where it performs its primary functions, some 90% of our serotonin supply is found in the digestive tract in blood platelets. But our body needs tryptophan, an amino acid, to convert into serotonin. So we have to eat foods that are high in tryptophan. So let's have a look. Can you believe tofu is one of your highest foods that are highest in tryptophan? And most people don't know how to use tofu. Well, hopefully we're going to teach you that down the track. Not today, but one other day. Flax seeds, critical. People who are depressed get into flax seeds. Now, flax seeds is also another name for linseeds. They're both the same seeds. It depends what you call them, but they're linseed or flaxseed. Pumpkin seeds, sesame seeds, almonds, walnuts. But listen to this, what they have found. And there's all of these. By the way, I should just stress that all of these points, Dr. Nedley has all research. He's making these claims, all of these points in his book. He's got research studies for all of these, and you can look at the back of each chapter, and he's got countless studies. So all of these, when it says meat and milk in the diet block the flow of tryptophan to the brain. And he said some people are so sensitive that all they have to do is to have a little bit less tryptophan that they need, and they will all of a sudden go into depression. So they're very, very sensitive. But we need to eat foods that are high in tryptophan. Now, this is a very important one. As I said before, linseeds. A diet deficient in omega-3 is linked to depression, increased aggression in prisoners, and children with low levels have lower IQ. They are necessary, omega-3 fats are necessary for optimal brain development, and flaxseed or chia seeds are the best sources. Now, I'm going to go back to some of these in the other section a little while longer, later, so we will go back to omega-3s in a little while. But I just wanted to talk to you about folic acid too. Depression is worsened by insufficient blood levels of a B vitamin called folic acid or folate. Increased risks of depression and Alzheimer's is linked to folic acid depletion. If deficient in mothers, unborn can have heart disease, stroke, or a brain or spinal cord defects. So this is serious, and I know that when mothers are pregnant, the doctors really monitor them carefully to make sure, because look at that, spinal cord defects. We don't want spinal cord defects in babies, but that's caused from a folic acid defect. Yeah. Okay, vitamin B12. Now that's also critical. It is vital to the health of the nervous system. Symptoms of deficiency are poor coordination, frequently forgetfulness, and depression. Found in fortified plants, foods, and animal foods. And it can be found in some plants if they are grown in soils with organic fertilizer that are rich in B12. As we age, our stomach loses the ability to absorb B12, but we can use a supplement if we're unsure. Now, I've been a vegan now for probably 35 years. Any store of meat that you would have in your body lasts probably around about 3 years before you really need to supplement. But I periodically, and this is what I do, I periodically supplement with B12. I don't do it regularly all the time, but I do it off and on when I feel I need to do it. So, because I know that B12 is something we need to be very careful about it. I have other things. I'm very conscious of eating a lot of leafy greens. I know your B12 is on your leafy greens if you don't wash them, because that's where the animals get it from. Animals, we can say we get our B12 from the meat we're eating, which you do, but the actual animal that was killed to create the meat had to get their B12 from somewhere. Where did they get it from? They got it from their leafy greens that they eat, which they haven't washed, right? And you see it's on the soil, it's in the soil. And that's why we're mindful of not always washing and washing and washing and washing everything that you're eating. If it's clean, I know if I'm growing my greens in the garden, I look at them and if I can see they're clean, I will use them, because I know that flora that's on those greens is beneficial to my body, very beneficial. And I said to you in some of the other classes, I believe we as a society are so paranoid about disinfecting everything. It's going to kill us in the long run, because we're killing all our good germs off, all our good bacteria off, because we've got that. We're so fascinated with having everything disinfected. But back to B12, I think yes, you can use a B12. Now, homocysteine is an amino acid, and it's mostly from meat and dairy. Elevated levels are linked to stroke, heart attack, blood vessels, blockage, and depression. The amount of homocysteine in your blood is one of the best objective indicators of how healthy you are and how long you're going to live. Speeds up oxidation and aging, causes damage to your arteries, causes your immune system to weaken, increases pain and inflammation. So we need a low homocysteine level. Okay, I talked to you a little bit earlier about their protein intake and early puberty. Early puberty is linked to depression in later life. And high intake of animal foods, ages 3 to 5, leads to early menstruation. And high protein animal food is linked with increasing chronic diseases as well as depression. Do you know, years ago, the average age of menstruation for a girl was 14. Now it is 11 in Australia. Something has changed. What's changed? Well, do you know, I actually know quite a few people who eat like I do. They're vegans, and they've got families, they've got children. And you know, it's really interesting, because I've spoken to some of the mothers, and do you know what they said? You put a child and you bring up that child on a pure plant-based diet, and guess what? The girls get their periods much later. Maybe 14, yeah? Because you brought her up on a vegan diet. And she was 14. Look, it's so much better than having them at 12 or 11. And some of them, as I said, much younger. Some of them are very young. But you put them on that diet. I know quite a few of our friends, I've talked to them and I said, well, how old were your girls when they developed and they got their menstruation? And all of them. Did you know in China, some of them were 16, 18? That's years ago. I don't know about it now, because China is going a little bit, into McDonald's and that now. But the old Chinese, the rural China, like as per the China study, their average age of menstruation was 16 and sometimes even to 18. You know, that causes a lot less complications in life, doesn't it? Okay, obesity is associated with depression. After a meal, blood sugars in excess of 7.8 are associated with fatigue. Obesity is related to a low energy level, and getting on a weight loss program and losing weight can improve energy levels and mood. So we know that your obesity is associated with depression. Okay, now getting back to our hits, that was nutritional. 4 is social. Now, this is codependency, when these individuals lack the security in their inner psyche that result from being openly loved and nurtured by 2 emotionally stable parents. Somewhere they've missed out. They haven't had stable parents to bring them up. And the absence of social support, loneliness. People can be they can be so lonely, and yet there are people all around them that they could be friends with, but they cut themselves off from it. And they lack that social support. We need a social support system. You know, I found it very interesting because I know how people were affected when they were cut off and they were locked up during this COVID time. But you know something, I didn't feel like that because I've got a social system that we were still encouraging each other. You have friends, you have people, you have in your inner circle. It is so good to have people like that. So you can't be lonely. Negative, stressful events, maybe death, sickness, or a job loss could have set it off as well too. Grandparents raising children. This is another one. Parental separation, children who do not live with both biological parents. Sexual abuse are destined to be chronically depressed. This is what Dr. Nettles found out. And those who belong to a low social class. So these are social factors that increase the depression risk. Now, the next one is quite interesting because he said that there is a toxic element. Some people can have toxicity in their brain. And primarily, he believes it's caused through heavy metals or the metals and through lead. Now, it's amazing because sometimes you could have lived in a house when you were a child and there was lead pipes. You didn't know about it, but then as an adult, you don't know why on earth I've got all these health problems. Well, could it be linked back to those years when you were living and you were drinking water through these lead pipes? Or it's even in the water, or it's in the dirt, or it's in calcium supplements, lead-based paints, manufacturing environments. So all of these things can lead to increased rates of depression, apathy, irritability, fatigue, confusion, diminished ability to control anger, impairment of brain activity and behaviour. And it's not the person's fault. They have been exposed to toxicity. You can have mercury. Was very interested because imported herbs and vitamins, industrial exposure, certain beauty creams. You see a lot of them. You know what they're putting in a lot of the products nowadays, in the beauty creams, they've got things in it we shouldn't have in it. And some of them times they've even got mercury in them, aluminium in them. Certain vaccines. Fish. Now that is a huge one. I found it very interesting because when I was in Fiji, there was a group, one of the classes I was running in Fiji, there was some of the students came in from Kiribati. And they have an incredibly high diet of fish. They eat a lot of fish because there's not much growing on Kiribati. And so there was one woman there. She came along, her daughter had little children. She had very small children, and the mother came along as a babysitter. And the mother was in her 50s, and she said to me, and she was telling me how so many people from her island had Alzheimer's, they had memory problems because of all the fish that they were eating. And this is what Gabriel, the guy who is the head of the clinic or the resort where I was teaching, not a resort, it's like a place where you could go in like a health retreat. That's what it was, retreat. He said it was because of the fish that they're eating. They have an awful lot of fish, and a lot of it was even raw, but they were having huge amounts of fish in their diet, and that was affecting their brains. And nearly everyone aged over 50 had some memory impairment. Amalgam fillings, that's another one. Then we've got manganese, we've got arsenic, we've got different toxic elements that we can be exposed to. We can have some that's in our medication, bismuth. Then we've got organotin, which is in insect and rodent killers and disinfectants. And then we've got trimethylene chlorine, chemical workers exposed to this report, forgetfulness. And all of these chemicals, all these, you can't even pronounce some of these chemicals. They're such ridiculous long names, and you wonder what on earth they do to you. Well, guess what? They're making you toxic. Remember, I keep telling you, my little pet one is all these hand sanitizers that people have in their bathrooms. If you go and look at the ingredient list on them, can you pronounce the name? I tell you what, I can always remember one of the early people who used to teach was one of my teachers at learning all this. He says, if you can't put it in your mouth and eat it, you should never put it on your skin. And I thought that's pretty logical, isn't it? Okay, but you can also now I've added this wasn't in Dr. Nedley's thing, but I can also add that you can get toxins from many other sources. You can get them from chemicals and additives in foods. You can get them from pesticides, herbicides. You can get them from skin products. You can get toxins from chemtrails, and we know that we are getting lots and lots and lots of them now. We can get toxins from EMF exposure. We can get them from fungus and parasites. We get them from vaccinations and radiation. So we're being exposed to toxins everywhere in our lifestyle today. Okay, the next hit was circadian rhythms. Now, our bodies run on an internal body clock even if we were sealed in a cave. And our bodies love to be on schedule, for example, bedtime, rising times, meal times. And did you know that people who are on shift work suffer more depression? We know somebody who used to be in shift work and he could never handle those nights that he used to work. It would affect him all the time, affect him emotionally. And I know that other people say that shift work can decrease your lifespan dramatically, especially if you're working overnight, all those nights. Mentally healthy people with no risk factor for depression can become depressed if the circadian rhythms are significantly disturbed, because we have this rhythmic cycle in our body. Our bodies love regularity. And winter months trigger depression. Why? You stop and think. Very common, because in northern latitudes, seasonal affective disorder is common. And did you know that in some of the northern Scandinavian countries, they have little light boxes that you can walk in, and they're shaped like a telephone box, the old-fashioned telephone booth, and you go in there and you get a dose of light, because they know how it affects the people up. You imagine living in Scandinavian countries where you've got 6 months of the year, you're in darkness. We need light. We have to get adequate outdoor light and fresh air and the negative ions. And so they have to substitute it and use light therapy and use that to get their exposure to light. I'm going to come back to some of these in the cures, okay? But then we have the addictions. That's another hit. Now, some people have a very addictive personality. They can be addicted to alcohol, nicotine, gambling, pornography, caffeine, illicit drugs. So you've got to start, if you're very much, you've got to start eliminating as many of these hits as you can. First, you need to recognize you have a problem and acknowledge the habit is addictive. Then want to change. Then decide to do something and then start practicing it daily. Overcoming addictions requires understanding of temperance. Now, this is it. You ask people, what is temperance? And so many people saying, oh, moderation. Well, you know, that's not quite the real definition of temperance. Temperance is moderation in healthy substances, but abstinence in anything unhealthy. So, you know, we've got to be moderate in everything we take. We can't, you know, I often say carrots are good for you, but you wouldn't want to eat a bucket of carrots, would you? You know, you've still got to be moderate in them. But we don't need, all those addictive things we don't need to go near. But thanks be to God who gives us a victory. And this is the point. I have known many people who have had victory over those addictions. Alcohol, gambling, cigarettes. God can give them the victory just like that. But they need to know that they can have it. And you can also turn defeat into victory. And believe me, many times you want to get off this. Let's say you decide you want to get off this addictive habit. You decide you want to get off cigarettes. And how long do people last? Well, quite frankly, a lot of them can fall. But if you have made mistakes, you certainly can gain a victory if you see these mistakes and regard them as beacons of warning. Thus you turn defeat into victory, disappointing the enemy and honouring your Redeemer. So you can, just because you've made one mistake, doesn't mean to say that just get up, try again. There's no, you know, many people fail the first time. That's fine. Don't let it think, oh, I'll never succeed. Just try again. Okay, then we have our eighth one, lifestyle. Seasonal defective disorder occurs mostly in winter when there is little or no sunlight, even at noon. But we need to be in bright light for 30 to 60 minutes a day. Now, outdoor light on a sunny day measures at 50,000 lux. Bright indoor light is 400 lux. Less than 15% of daylight. So can you see why people, if you're not getting out into the bright, if people are depressed, they must get out into the bright sunlight. And that increases serotonin and melatonin. Okay, but also you need to exercise. It requires rhythmic motion of large muscle groups, example, walking, swimming, cycling, at least, this is minimum, least 30 minutes 3 times a week. And you don't have to have equipment, you just got to walk. Walking is probably one of the best. Interval training mixes rest with exercise, accelerates fitness in a shorter time, and high intensity interval training is really good if you can do it. But it strengthens heart and circulation, your thyroid function improves, everything improves. Then we've got deep breathing. Breathing exercises encouraging 6 slow, deep breaths per minute for 1 hour a day improves blood flow and improves exercise tolerance. Blood saturation is a test to determine blood oxygen, and when less than 95%, this is associated with decreased ability to perform complex mental tasks. Affects mood, impairs muscle and metabolic functions, and leads to muscle atrophy. And you can even buy these little meters that you can put on your finger that tells you how much oxygen you've got in your body. And the cause of this, shallow breathing. Now I'm going to talk more about that in a minute too. Now this is an interesting one. They have found, and there is loads of research in this book that tell you that people are depressed, can come out of their depression or one of the helps that can bring them out of the depression is listening to classical music. Can you believe that? But not all music improves mood and mental function. Classical music or traditional classical hymns are the only style of music that has been demonstrated to improve mental health. Listen intently to classical music no less than 1 hour every 2 weeks. And I remember we watched quite a few DVDs on this, listening to the classical music. We even had, remember, Marilyn, we had those CDs we were giving out and we were sharing people. There are certain ones you can listen to. The depression, the book here lists which ones are best. You know, if you're a little bit, you want to gain a little bit of courage, you listen to certain courage. If you want to relax a bit, you listen to different types of music. So, but your classical music, and to actually listen to it, not just have it in the background, you actually listen to it, will actually bring you out of depression. Isn't that interesting? I remember one of the women at the class we were doing, she said that they had problems at one of the stations in Melbourne for vandalism, and they have a lot of graffiti around. So what the council did, they played classical music through loudspeakers at the railway station, and they got no more graffiti. Yeah, so people, obviously they're not attracted there. They didn't want to listen to the classical music. Okay, now lifestyle is your restful sleep. Sleepless nights and despair are closely linked. Chronic insomniacs have 40 times more likely to have major depression. But excessive sleep, that's the opposite, your hypersomnia, has even greater percentage to develop mental disorders. Now, insomnia improves if orders of meals are reversed. Simple as that. Evening meals need to be eaten 3 to 4 hours before retiring. Fill day with interesting and profitable activities that combat sleep disorders. And you know something, I could swear to this. I have been eating, we eat 2 meals a day. We've eaten 2 meals a day for the last 30 years. We don't eat tea normally or evening meal. So I have a breakfast and lunch, and that's it. And then till tomorrow morning. And sometimes you feel a bit hungry, but it doesn't worry us. We just get over it. But your sleep at night is very sound. Now you want to lose weight? When we first switched off to this, I lost probably about, I've been the same ever since. I lost maybe nearly a stone of weight. Peter lost about 2 stone of weight. And you want to lose weight, reverse your meals around. Don't have your breakfast and your lunch, then no evening meal. You've got to get used to it. Sometimes it takes a little while to get used to it. And you've got to know what to eat. You have to eat substantially filling meals. You can't just have like a little light bowl of cornflakes or something for breakfast, and expect to go through to lunch. But if anyone's interested in that, I can share you with what personally what I do. But that's another subject. Okay, the other thing is to avoid negative thinking. Many depressed people look on the downside of life. And you must deal with your distorted thoughts. You must retrain your thoughts by immediately replacing it by focusing on the wonderful blessings of life. You turn your disappointments into appointments. A new experience is opening up to you. So you've got to stop thinking like that. Several studies show that depressed patients with deep belief in God will recover sooner than non-religious patients. But going through the forms of religion without firm belief is of little benefit. Daily reading of Scripture, praying and developing faith in God is recommended for improving mental health, and spiritual part helps with the motivation. Okay, and the 9th one is medical conditions. So did you know that if you have a head injury, it can set you up for depression? Slip over and fall over and you hit your head and you can end up with depression. Simple as that. If you had a stroke, heart disease, cancer, terminal illness, AIDS, Parkinson's disease, or diabetes, all of these. Postnatal depression, premenstrual syndrome, sleep disorders, a thyroid disease inadequately treated, adrenal glands also inadequately treated, parathyroid gland disease, and lupus. So these all have problems. Medications can cause depression, decreased brain electrical activity, and you can even get a sick building syndrome when you're actually working in a building that has got probably EMFs around. And they call it a sick building syndrome. Some infectious diseases spread via domestic animals. Now, this one interested me, and I thought to myself, what on earth is this? I wrote this in there, and I thought I'd check it up. Dr. Nedley is saying there's some specific diseases that are that are related to depression that people pick up from their pets and animals. Isn't that interesting? And he's got that listed in his book, all the research for that. Then the 10th one is the frontal lobe. Now, what is a frontal lobe? The frontal lobe is this front part of your brain, the part right behind your forehead. If your frontal lobe is removed or compromised, depression is more likely to occur. And depressed people have a low blood flow to their frontal lobe. Studies suggest that a decrease in frontal lobe function is the cause of depression and not the effect. Okay, so they also you can get a mania or an emotional disorder if you have frontal lobe diseases, obsessive compulsive disorder, and you've heard of people have obsessive compulsive disorder. Very, very hard to get somebody out of that, but something they can. But they have to know, have to know how to do it. Appetite increase, depression, attentive deficit hyperactivity disorder. Impaired frontal lobe causes an impaired will. Drugs damage the frontal lobe. Alcohol damages the front lobe, the front brain. But caffeine, can you believe it, that caffeine upsets the delicate balance of nerve transmissions in the brain? And most people do not realise that one of the things that they're drinking all the time if they've got depression is causing it is caffeine. I can still remember one lady I know that she's treating people, she was taking people in to treat them, and she was detoxing them, and she says the hardest drug to detox from is caffeine. She finds it far harder to detox from caffeine than she does from heroin or any of the hard drugs. Caffeine is very hard to come off. You stop and think, if you're being a coffee drinker and all of a sudden you just decide not to drink it anymore, what happens? Well, it significantly decreases frontal lobe blood flow. It raises the dopamine level, which standard drug therapy uses dopamine blocking agents. Nicotine impairs frontal lobe. Your meat, your cheese and your wine have chemicals, derivatives that are associated with depression. Hypnosis short-circuits the frontal lobe. Reasoning power is bypassed. Television can hypnotise. The flickering light in the television can actually hypnotise you, and that can impair your frontal lobe. Well, you stop and think, I think nearly everyone in our society has been exposed to television and the flickering lights. Now, this is a very interesting case because this is in Dr. Nedley's book in Proof Positive, I think it was. He's talking about Phineas Gage. In America, there was a man he lived from 1823 to 1860, and he was working on the railroad. And you can see there on the left-hand side of the picture, he's sitting there and he's got this long rod. Well, that rod is called a tamping rod. And it actually, he was blowing up, he was putting explosives on the railway line. That actually blew up through him, and it blew up through his cheek, up through his brain, and it came out the top of his head. And he lived. Can you imagine that? And he lived. But everyone who knew him knew and saw his frontal lobe was completely gone. This is the classic sort of, they have this in a lot of books because this is a classic demonstration of what happens when your frontal lobe is gone. He became fitful, he became irreverent, he became grossly profane. His whole personality completely changed. Everything that he was before, he wasn't. He eventually died an epileptic. Very interesting to read about him. But his whole personality changed because that frontal lobe was completely destroyed. Now, getting back to TV, sexual arousal is linked to the right side of the brain, and it's characteristic of depression. But children are exposed to this constantly on TV. And constant stimulation of the senses shuts down the ability to think and face life rationally, leads to escape techniques and adaptive responses which tend to involve withdrawal, apathy and rejection of disciplined thinking when faced with duties and decisions. And wrong food diminishes frontal lobe thinking. For example, if you have a diet that's high in sugar, high in your carbohydrates, especially your unprocessed carbohydrates or your simple carbohydrates. Certain music, rock music, syncopated rhythms will decrease frontal lobe function. And mice subjected to 8 weeks of soft rock music had permanently impaired memories, permanent damage, and it could be seen. 8 weeks of classical music had no detrimental effect on a group of mice. So in this book, it relates 3 groups of mice. One group played rock music, soft rock music. The other group played classical music, and the other group played no music. 3 groups of mice. 8 weeks. At the end of 8 weeks, the ones who listened to the soft rock music, the mice were all hopeless. They couldn't even find their own feeding. They couldn't get their way through the maze. They couldn't even find their own food. Yet the ones on the classical music and the no music showed no signs of impairment. As a matter of fact, I think they were better off. Then they waited a few weeks and they find out if the mice had any change. No, the mice who were exposed to rock music still had the impairment there some weeks later. So they were saying there that it's permanent damage. It was permanent damage to the mice. So can you see what we're exposing our young people to when they're just listening to this music all the time? Something has got to give. It's damaging their brain. They're not getting that into their frontal lobe. Even skeptics admit that prayer has unique benefits that Eastern meditations cannot provide. Scientific studies show that praying for patients actually improves their health. Prayer has benefits that extends beyond mere meditation, and prayer's focus is not on dealing with the symptoms, but to bring the praying person in touch with God. So I've got lots of research on this, that prayer actually helps in healing compared to those who are not prayed for as opposed to those who are prayed for. So we have to protect our frontal lobe, prevent or control underlying diseases that may damage your frontal lobe, avoid drugs and toxins and give it adequate supply of oxygen, supply it with good nutrition and avoid harmful foods, get adequate sunshine, exercise, and provide proper inputs by controlling what you see, hear and experience. And exercise expands the brain. It's interesting because if occupied with only trivial commonplace matters only, never summoned to earnest efforts to comprehend great and eternal truths, it becomes dwarfed and enfeebled. Hence the value of the scriptures as a means of intellectual culture. And they know that the scriptures really enhances your brain power. Okay, so let's go back. We went through, just gone through these. If you have 4 or more, you've got depression. So the obvious ones you've got to get, as I said, some people are just born with some. They'll never get rid of those. They've just have a disadvantage because of the family that they were born into. Now, we're going to look at ways to help depressed. I actually thought, first of all, I said ways to help cure depression. And I thought, cure depression, maybe some people think you can't cure depression, so I'll just say help the depressed. But I actually feel you can cure it, but that's just my thinking. Okay, is there a cure for depression? It can hit any person. We know that mostly the medical profession gives you medications. Antidepressants can help 20%, 30% do not respond to medication, and 50% have slight response. Now that's in this book, that's Nedley's research. I don't know if that's the same here, I assume it is, but side effects of some medication, weight gain, I don't care attitude, increase impulsiveness, and even suicide. I've heard of that before. There's certain drugs that some people go on, they can be very prone to suicide. Okay, but then we're talking about this self-medication, chocolates. Isn't that the one that most people indulge in when they have problems, coping? Why? Because it makes them feel good, temporarily. Candy. I know somebody who she said her weakness is just lollies. She used to always have a bag of them there. She's got off them now, thankfully. Alcohol, pornography, cocaine and other drugs. There is a way out. Find the underlying problem, for example, frontal lobe or distorted thoughts, and start making small steps. You've got to start somewhere. You've got to implement as many changes into your lifestyle as you are able to. Some will be found easier and some hard. But look, exercise is something that most people can do. And exercise is going to be critical for getting out of depression. People can walk their way out of depression. Ideally, 60 minutes a day can be divided up during the day. You don't have to do it all at once. But look at all the benefits of it. It increases circulation, increases oxygen, normalizes blood pressure, increases tone of the muscles and blood vessels, increases cardiac muscle tone and heart size, increases hemoglobin in the blood, charges brain and nervous cells with the electrical energy. Often said that if people could bottle this in a tablet, you'd be wealthy, wouldn't you? Strengthens muscles, bones and ligaments, lowers blood cholesterol and fats in the blood, burns unwanted fats, balances endocrine system, slows aging process, promotes endorphins, promotes good sleep, cleanses bloodstream and body. So exercise is just such an invaluable thing to us. Then we can oxygenate our body. Now this is an interesting one because I said earlier we've got to learn to breathe deeply, and this is what everyone out there is telling you about learning to breathe deeply. And many people only breathe using the top portion of their lungs. Correct deep breathing moves the lymphatic system, which is responsible for waste elimination. And we've got to really make sure that we have proper abdominal breathing. And it says spend 30 to 45 minutes daily taking no more than 6 breaths per minute. I can remember one class I was doing, it was down near Melbourne, and this guy put his hand up and he says, I want to let you know that I have been training. And I can't remember whether it was 1 or 2 hours, he was training for some martial arts when he was a lot younger. And he said he would do 1 or 2 hours, I can't remember what it was, of deep breathing every day. He said he could not believe how clear his thinking was. Absolutely incredible. But I want to share with you something here. And this is a book called The Oxygen Advantage by Patrick McKeon. And I've got it here. I bought it. I find it fascinating. Now this man Patrick McKeon was, when he was up to his age of 26, he had asthma. He had everything wrong with him, sort of thing, but very similar, an asthmatic. There was lots of other health problems. But he was a mouth breather. He learned to breathe through his nose, and he lost his asthma anything. And he became so much fitter. He could think a lot clearer. Basically because people are breathing through your mouth. How does he stop breathing through your mouth? Well, when he'd go to bed at night, he'd put a tape over his mouth. Micropore tape. He puts it this way. There was another friend of mine, she says she puts it this way. And I see that, but he says he puts it this way. And he's teaching everybody to go this way, but some people put it that way. Now, I prefer that way. You get micropore tape and you practice it during the day. You don't wait until you go to bed. You practice it during the day so you get used to it and you learn to breathe through your nose. And he said it unlocks greater levels of fitness and health, increases energy, it suppresses appetite, improves concentration and mental focus. Now, I've got a whole article in it on my Back to Eden newsletter, number 79, which you'd find on my website if you want to download it. The information from this book is just like this book is summed up in this article. But he talks about learning to breathe, and it's not deep. It is rhythmic. It is deep in a way, but it's very, let's say, it's not like taking in a huge breath. It's taking in a very shallow breath, but very methodic, and learning to breathe the proper way. And he says increases so much. Nearly everyone's health increases. And I've got myself, when I'm going through this, I've got myself reinterested in it. I'm going to redo that, go back into that again. I think that there's a lot of advantage in this one, the oxygen advantage, because it says you could increase your blood flow to your brain, everything. So loads and loads of things that's going to help. The other thing is out in the light. Remember I said earlier on, get out in the light. 15 times more brighter light than indoor light. So get outside. You're suffering from depression, go out in the sunlight. And it improves alertness and mental ability. It decreases depression and fatigue. It increases oxygen content of the blood, decreases our resting heartbeat, helps set and maintains our internal body clock that regulates hormones, sleep patterns, mood and appetite. A major source of vitamin D, which we need. It stimulates the immune system. It penetrates deep into the tissue for healing. And that's something else, which is another subject. Improves appetite, assimilation, elimination and digestion. And chemicals and toxins are eliminated 10 to 1,000 times faster than artificial light. And that's done. I got that particular research in a book at home where they did this experiment on some rabbits, and they said yes, they do. I think they took out the rabbits, half of the rabbits, all of the rabbits had half of their blood volume taken out. Then they put one half of the rabbits went into sunlight, the other halves stayed inside. All of those who stayed inside died. All of those who went outside all lived. We need light. We need bright light. Stimulates our pineal gland. Dark nights and bright nights help keep the hormones functioning properly. Dark nights and bright days help keep the hormones functioning properly. I just said that. Using sunglasses diminishes this function. You must get light into your eyes. And when I was a young woman, I couldn't go outside. I'd have to have bright sunglasses on. Guess what? I don't even own any sunglasses now. I'd never wear sunglasses. Why? Because I'm so used to it. I've trained my eyes not to need sunglasses. Why? And those sunglasses stop the light getting into your retina through your pupil. It hits the retina of your eye and it goes up into your brain and stimulates your pineal gland. And guess what? Most people are wearing dark glasses and it's not stimulating their pineal gland. Bright light therapy, which is you can buy a light if you don't get outside, and especially good for people who are stuck inside on days that are pretty dismal. I think you bought one, didn't you, Marilyn? Yeah, okay. They're not that dear. They're called a light therapy box. You can just, they're a little light. They're probably the size of a large mobile phone. Yours is a bit bigger than that, yeah. But yeah, I know there's different sizes. You can get one, but you can buy them. They're probably in the low 100 bit. Yeah, they were. We got a whole lot of them when they maybe were $100, maybe in the low 100. Wouldn't be $200. But this is very good for people who are stuck inside. They can't get outside. So you can get glasses too. We're just told, but they're expensive. Okay, but these here, and they're good for seasonal affective disorders. Outdoor. Well, I've read those before. Increases serotonin and your melatonin, and helps restore circadian rhythm. But this is an interesting one because he goes into here. If you, especially these women who are depressed after having a baby, if you get out into the sunlight, the very first thing in the morning when the sun comes up, and get the sun into your eyes, and I'm not talking about staring up into the sun, but if we're ever out walking, which we're often when it's come up in the time when it's sunlight, you actually, for that first 5 minutes that the sun comes over the horizon, look at the sun then. But after then, you can't look at it, obviously, when it's getting up higher in the sky. But the first 5 minutes, look at the sun. That's going to bring healing into your eyes. But if you make sure you're outside 30 minutes after sunrise for insomnia, and for early awakening, if you're awakening in the morning too early, get 30 minutes of light before sundown. Interesting, isn't it? Morning light therapy is superior to evening light therapy, but this is better than none at all. Get into regular schedule. So many people are depressed. Their eating is all over the place. You get up, because they're not sleeping at night. They get up and they've slept in and they're still sleeping and they have their breakfast at 11 o'clock. So that puts them out. Your body loves regularity. It wants food at the same time every day. And one of the best things you can do for your health is to eat regularly every day. Get up, eat your breakfast at approximately the same time, your lunch or whatever meals you're eating them at the same time. And by the way, you're going to be much, much healthier if you do not eat anything, not even one nut in between your meals. Train yourself to go without any food between meals. Your body, you're much, and it's easy to do. It's not hard to do. You just got to learn to eat properly. But you know what they're doing with the young children? You go to school now. I mean, when we went to school, you'd have play lunch, and then you'd go home. But nowadays they're having a mid-morning snack, and then there's another snack, and they're snacking and snacking and snacking, and these kids are eating all day long. That's causing problems. Yes, that's right. Eating irregular meals helps definitely. Yeah. But I believe one of the best things to do is to change your eating. Have your morning meal, quite a substantial morning breakfast, then a lunch, and if you're going to eat, have a very, very light evening meal. Very light. And we're talking maybe just a piece of fruit or something very light, something maybe crackers and spread or something very easy to digest, but not a heavy meal of a night time. Going to bed early is far superior than going to bed late. Sleeping, waking, exercise, have a regular routine. And so I love going to bed early. I'm an early to bed person. I like to be, especially in the winter nights, I love it when we go to bed. Sometimes on some nights we say, well, let's go to bed early at 7 o'clock. And I'll go to bed and we'll just sit and read in bed or something like that. But it doesn't take long and then you fall asleep, or you get tired and you want to fall asleep. But I love it. especially in the winter. I mean, it's not the same in the summertime. I admit that. But go to bed early. Sleeping the hours before midnight are twice as beneficial to us as the hours after midnight. Staying up late unbalances our body clock. We were created to have a weekly cycle. It is a built-in feature of our physiology. God commands us to remember to keep his Sabbath day holy. And we were created to have a weekly Sabbath day. Choose food wisely. Fast food leads to depression. And you look at all those things there. You know what? I mean, I've never been into cola or all those things, but I've been into all the other things. Or not hamburgers, really. Never got into them. But yeah, all those other things I was into. And now they don't interest you. Not at all. Choose food wisely. Many improve their mood with diet changes. This is not normally included in treating the depressed or anxious. Serotonin, an important neurotransmitter in the brain, cannot be made unless tryptophan is present. I told you that before. And some people are very sensitive to a small temporary reduction of tryptophan. The best food, I believe, is a whole food plant-based diet. Lots of colours. Look at the purples and the reds and the yellows and the greens. Lots of vegetables. Very interesting. And most people are not eating this. I get my people always say, well, you're a vegan, vegetarian, where do you get your protein from if you're not eating meat? I get my protein from my legumes and primarily from my seeds and beans and lentils. And you know how to learn to cook beautifully, lovely beans and lentils and all sorts of beautiful dishes. You can make patties out of them. You can make a roast out of them. You can make like a sort of a stew type of thing out of them or a goulash type of thing out of them. Then I have a small amount of seeds a day. Not many, but just a small amount. You need to have regularly because you're getting your fats, your essential fats here. We need fats. People who are depressed haven't got the right fats in their brain. We also do linseeds, sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, all your different seeds. Now, most people don't eat seeds in their diet. And a lot of people, you need them. You need your omega-3 fats. Remember, diet deficient in omega-3 fats is linked to depression, increased aggression in prisoners, and children with low levels have a lower IQ. Omega-6s are abundant in many foods. Now, if you ask people what's the difference between omega-3s and omega-6, they're both essential. We need both. But omega-6s are very easily found in our diets. Omega-3s are harder to come by. Flax seeds or chia seeds are the best sources. Now, we need the correct ratio of omega-3 to omega-6s. Years and years ago, people used to have 1 part of omega-3 to 2 parts of omega-6s. Now it is 1 part of omega-3 to 15 parts of omega-6s, and some people even say 20 parts of omega-6s. The balance is just so way out. We must look for more omega-3s in our diet. And it's interesting because recent research demonstrates that bipolar disorder, manic depression, in addition to major depression or your unipolar disorder, can be helped by a diet high in omega-3. Even bipolar, just by adding omega-3s to their diet, can help them. Everyone who has a problem with depression must get into their omega-3s, critical. Where do you find omega-3s? You get them in your flaxseed or your linseed, walnuts, sesame seeds, avocados, strawberries, turnips and bananas. Now they're your main sources. We have every morning, we have probably about 2 tablespoons 1 to 2 tablespoons of ground linseeds, sunflower, sesame and pepitas. There's a recipe here for a flax nut sprinkle, which is very nice too. You can have that. But, by the way too, if you're going to grind them up, you need to grind them up fresh every day. And see, this is a hard thing. People just got to get mentally, you can't just grind them up and have them there. Like years ago, we used to be told, go out and buy LSA. Have any heard of that one? LSA. Well, you go to the supermarket, there's a packet of LSA there, and people think, I'll buy that and I'll sprinkle it over my breakfast. Well, guess what? If it's been ground for longer than 20 minutes, it will start to go rancid. Anytime you break the shell of a nut or a seed, within 20 minutes it starts to oxidize, just like an apple oxidizes if you cut it. How long does it take an apple to go brown? Same thing happens to your nuts and your seeds, but you can't see it. That's why you have to have it fresh. If by chance you had too much and you ground too much and you wanted to keep it, I would deep freeze it immediately. I wouldn't leave it out of the deep freeze. I would put it in the freezer immediately and use it straight out of the freezer. Okay, omega-3, 6 ratio of seeds and just interesting here, you've got your flax down there, down your side. Your flax has a 22.81 omega-3 and 5.91 omega-6. Your chia is not quite as high, but then all your other seeds dramatically lower down. But look at the side. You obviously, those two there, the 22 and the 17, in general you want the ratio in the far right column to be as high as possible. So your best seeds are flax and chia to be introducing into your diet. How much do you need? Well, there's a different scale there, but getting a few tablespoons of seeds high in omega-3s like chia or flaxseed is more than enough. Omega-3s in most cases. So you just got to get maybe 2 tablespoons a day, and that's fine. But remember, grind it fresh. How do you grind it fresh? Well, usually most of the little bullets nowadays have it, or a little one of your... I have a little coffee grinder. If you've got a Thermomix, it will grind it. Most of your modern appliances grind them. Remember, you have to grind them, because if you eat flaxseed and you just put them and you eat them, they will pass through you and you won't even absorb them, because the shells are so hard. So you have to, or if you didn't have, you would soak them first. That's an alternative, that you could eat them if you soaked them. But we need correct fats. We need them for short-term learning in adults. Vegetable fats are superior to animal fats. Vegetable fats create more flexible brain synapses, while animal fats render them more rigid. Okay, so we need good fats. We need folic acids. We talked about this before. Okay, now here is where we get our folic acid from. Where I get mine from: chickpeas, black-eyed peas, lentils, red kidney beans, red navy beans, sunflower seeds, dark leafy greens. And do you know what I've heard now, which is very current, is now, I've told you that I've been a vegan for all these years, and I'm encouraging you to sort of get off your meats and that. Did you know that now what they're doing, they're going to bring in, and I'm not sure when it's coming in, but somebody said it was going to be coming in by the middle of the year, where all your animals, all your cows now have to be injected with the COVID jab. So, that is. Some of them have actually been injected and it's killed some of the cows, but I'm not sure when it's coming in, but that's what they've been told. So they're bringing it in. So if you want to avoid that contaminated with the meat, this is the idea. This is what I believe you're going to... You need to learn to all these recipes. Have all these recipes up your sleeve so you know how to use chickpeas, how do you know how to cook with them, all these things. Plus your dark leafy greens. Vitamin B12, we talked a little bit about that before. You need to supplement if you have to. Avoid caffeine and alcohol. Interestingly enough, caffeine directly raises stress hormones, and they are related to panic attack symptoms. Coffee can be what is keeping people awake with insomnia. Alcohol lowers 3 hormones that are needed to cope with stress and anxiety. And make sure you have adequate hydration. Most people who are depressed do not drink enough water. And it's as simple as drinking enough water. I can remember Lorraine Day's videos years ago. I watched hers. She had cancer, and she got Dr. Lorraine Day, and she was a medical doctor, and she had she had cancer, and she just realised that the thing she never drank was water for years. Yeah, she was a trauma. Yeah, she has a trauma surgeon. Yes, and I know a number of people who are there in that there. Another nurse I know, she'd drink loads of coffee during the day to keep herself awake. And guess what? She was very dehydrated. And mostly depressed patients are dehydrated. And obviously, if you want to get them to drink water, don't get them to drink town tap water. It tastes disgusting. You need to put them on a good water. You need to put them, because I wouldn't like to drink. Pardon? Yeah, fluoride affects the brain, but true. But I wouldn't drink just tap water. But we need to drink pure water. And what it does, the downside of it is you know where all the toilets are. Yeah, true, isn't it? Yes. When dehydrated, our bodies are unable to secrete toxins and salts, and so tend to become bloated. Our blood needs to run thinner, have better brain health. And our bodies work on electrical circuitry. And our car battery won't, if it had no water, it wouldn't work. And what's happening? We need to have water because it sends electrical messages between cells so that your muscles can move, your eyes can see, your brain can think, and so on. Water generates electrical and magnetic energy inside and every cell of the body. It provides the power to live. Now, this is a good one, hydrotherapy. Get into your shower, and normally I would do it after I'm finished washing myself, but you need to go hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold, backwards and forwards, until you can get 30 seconds cold. And you repeat it twice daily for 7 to 10 days for the severely depressed. And I can tell you what they'll do when they get under there, they'll go, and guess what? That's good for them. The old-fashioned way was to treat people with shock treatment. Now, that's got a lot of bad effects on it. But this is a very good one. This is nature's shock treatment. You give somebody who is in shock hydrotherapy or hot and cold showers, and do it daily for a maintenance. But persons with heart problems, high blood pressure, or serious health conditions should not use contrast showers. You need to be a little bit sensible about it. But for most people, you can do hot and cold, no problem. And it's good for all of us. And you know what? If I've got to admit, there's still some days when I feel like, I don't want to do that. But I forced myself and said, come on, don't be a wimp. Yes, that's right. Especially in the winter, it's worse then, but it's the best then, and always finish on the cold. Remember that? And try to get 30 seconds cold. And you can if you go hot, cold, backwards and forwards. It's not hard once you do it. Your body gets accustomed to it. But it's one of the best things for your health. Get your circulation going. Massage, very good to stimulate your circulatory system. Now, this is another one, is analyze distorted thoughts. Traditional behaviour therapy attempts to help the patient to blame his disorder on something or someone else. Supposed resolution of the behaviour problems occurs when the individual somehow deals with the identified cause. But cognitive behaviour therapy, or CBT, attempts to help the patient determine what action or change in his behaviour he should take to effect a cure for his disorder. For instance, what's CBT? A cognition is a thought. So your cognitions are the way you are thinking at any moment, including this very moment. Your thoughts have a significant impact on how you feel. They affect depression, phobias, OCD, post-traumatic stress, anorexia, bulimia. Okay, examples of depressed and discouraged. I'm such a loser, I'll never get better. Nothing can help me. I don't have any problem with my thoughts, my problems are real. And you can never help these people unless they want to change their thoughts. You will never help them. And your feelings result from the messages you give yourself. What do you tell yourself? Are you happy? What we think affects who we are. What do you tell it? What are the mental things? How are you? Oh, I feel terrible. You know, you're going to feel terrible. You're going to feel terrible. Have you said or have you heard these words? I'm stupid. I'm not good enough. I'll never amount to anything. I'm useless. I'm such a failure. I hate myself. I can't do anything right. I am a nothing. I'd be better off dead if I were dead. Now, these are thoughts that people say. They have to stop putting these in there, because are you a victim? Our thinking has a tendency to make us a victim. Now, when we look at a rose, do we look at the rose or the thorns? And some people just look at the thorns. That's just the way they are. How are you? Oh. You know, they just can't see the good parts of life. And research has documented that the negative thoughts, which always emotional turmoil nearly always contain gross distortions. On the surface, they may seem valid, but you will learn that they are irrational or just plain wrong. All or nothing thinking, okay? Overgeneralization. Okay, you say, oh, you always do that to me. Or you never are there on time. You know, we make overgeneralization. Or we concentrate on the filter. We concentrate all the time on the negative. We disqualify the positive, then turn the neutral or positive into negative. Or we jump to conclusion. Maybe a friend has passed in the street who ignored you, and in reality, he was absorbed in his own problem. We surmise that the worst could happen. We magnify or minimize. We emotionally realize, I feel like a dud, so I am a dud. We label and mislabel. We label ourselves as fat. We label ourselves as a slob. We label ourselves as pigs. We label ourselves as klutz. We label ourselves as a no-hoper. Or we personalise everything. We filter everything through how does it affect me? I'm personalising it. But we have to acknowledge the truth. If we're going to help somebody, we have to identify it, and we must acknowledge the truth. It's simple, but it's not easy. We have to listen to your thoughts and challenge them and replace them with truth. Okay, so you have to think, and sometimes you might need help with some friends to help you along with this. But for instance, this is a challenge to all of us here. Realistic thinking does not come naturally. It must be conscious choice followed by a strong effort. For 14 consecutive days, decide to say nothing critical or negative about anything or any person, including yourself. If you slip up any day during the 2 weeks, you must begin again by starting at day 1. Ask a friend to do it with you. Don't get discouraged. Virtually everyone slips up, but you can manage it by week 8. Practice, practice, practice. Remember that? Yes, remember that. I remember it well. Yeah. Nothing, no critical or negative things for 14 days. Because the ancient evidence of power of thought, the Bible tells us, for as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. If you think you're a dud, you are a dud. You're telling yourself that because that's what you're telling yourself. You've got to stop telling yourself those things. And, it's really interesting because you can start helping others. Helping others will increase happiness and usefulness. And, we need to go out of our way to help people. And, isn't it a rewarding thing to help someone? He that watereth shall be watered also himself. That's a law in the Bible. It really happens. Do volunteer work. Help somebody. Get involved. Learn that there are many far worse off than yourself. Work with animals. Work with children. Work in the garden. Be aware of your own limitations. Don't allow yourself to become drained by trying to solve another's troublesome problems. Realize if you are not able to cope with other people's problems, just be aware of it. Have an attitude of gratitude. Look around and see how blessed you are, then list them. Thank God for these. And look around and see how others are suffering more than yourself. And this sense of gratitude counteracts this negativity. I recently met a woman who told me that she was suicidal when she was in her 20s. She's now probably in her mid-30s. She said she was suicidal and depressed. And I said, how did you get out of it? She said, I just decided to start to have an attitude of gratitude. She said, I started to look around and I started to think of all the things that I can be thankful for. And she said, I started to do that. And she said, all of a sudden, I saw a lot more than I ever realised before. There were so many things that were going on that I could be thankful for. Expressing gratitude may be the key to happiness, according to a 2003 study. Researchers reported that by being thankful, you recognise the good in your life, which is crucial in overcoming depression. In a follow-up study, the scientists note that the regular grateful thinking can increase happiness by as much as 25%. So start telling yourself and be thankful. We've got so much to be thankful for, Sometimes it's, isn't it terrible? And a lot of people say to me, isn't it terrible getting older? And I always say, the alternative is no better, is it? It's worse. What have you got? If you got the alternative, you're dead. You're going to get older. Everyone's going to get older, and I just got to be thankful for it. A merry heart doeth good like a medicine, but a broken spirit dries the bone. You can use herbs. You can see the herbs there. Some of the herbs there, one of them St. John's wort, ginkgo biloba, some of the others, borage, some of those there you can use. And by the way, too, St. John's wort, they say they're in Germany, is established as the leading antidepressant in Germany. It's well tolerated with few significant side effects, but you cannot link St. John's wort with some of the depression medications. You've got to watch that. But if you're on no medication, it's safe to take St. John's wort and it will help. And the other one, and Dr. Nedley didn't have in here, but I do know how essential oils are so invaluable to help depression too. So you could add them in there too, because they go straight to your brains. It says there, when you breathe oil molecules into the back passages of your nose, they go straight into the part of the brain that is called the amygdala, which stores emotional experiences, and this part of your brain responds to smell. And some of the essential oils you could try is rosemary, peppermint, frankincense, focus spleens, but you can look at them up. There's quite a few of them, but the essential oils are great for helping depression. Okay, once again, we've got the music therapy. Listen to classical music, but paying attention to it and keeping your mind listening to it as it goes through. And you can get used to listening to it. Listen to how the melody goes, and all the different instruments coming in can become very, very effective. But this is another one too. They're saying that choir singing will actually help you come out of depression too. Lifting your voices together in praise can be an inspiring, fervent and soothing experience. But is there actually a physical basis for those feelings? So to find this out, researchers of the Salem Sahlgrenska Academy at the University in Sweden studied the heart rates of high school choir members. Okay, and their findings confirm that choir music has a calming effect on the heart, especially when sung in unison. So they have put pulse monitors on the singers' ears and on their hearts. They found out their heart rate slowed down and they all become synchronized. They all inhaled and exhaled in unison, and that was very, very calming for them. Okay, and we know that sacred song has power. The members of the choirs are synchronizing externally with melody, and the rhythm and how we see it has an internal counterpart. Okay, and we know that sacred song has wonderful power. It has the power to subdue rude and uncultivated natures, power to quicken the thought and to awaken sympathy, to promote harmony of action and banish the gloom and foreboding that destroy, encourage and weaken the effort. You know, I love singing. I'm not a very good singer, but I love singing. And I often sing to myself, and I don't care what it sounds like. Nobody's there to listen. I just sing. Peter can't hear me. I usually sing when I'm doing my Bible study. I'll sing, because I don't go where my piano is. I've got a tiny little keyboard and I just play my melody. And I sing to myself, not just to myself, I like singing to God. But you know what? I love it. I enjoy it. And I keep telling people, you know, God created the canary and he created the crow. So, does it matter what you sound like? No, it doesn't matter what you sound like. You just got to sing. A sense of belonging and social support. A sense of belonging improves mood and mental health. Busy social life doesn't guarantee a sense of belonging. We need to have people around who are friendly. But if you want friends, be friendly. Some people, you know, they are quite prickly, and you don't gravitate to them. Christ extends an invitation to all who are weary and heavy laden. Invitation is, learn of me, cast your burdens on me and take my yoke upon you, and you'll find rest, you'll find peace, you will delight to do his will and use to bless others. That is, look, to have that peace of mind is absolutely invaluable. I just love it. Daily read a chapter of Proverbs or do a topical Bible study on the subject of faith, or that. Learn to praise and thank God. Learn to talk to God in prayer. It is a positive duty to resist melancholy thoughts and feelings as much as a duty to pray. And I know a lady, and she's been in my home a couple of times, and she's telling me about, she was in a mental home, and she was in there, and it didn't look good. She knew it there, and she was in there for 2 or 3 weeks at this stage, and she knew that her prognosis wasn't too good. And she decided, she knew that she had to get out of it. So as the doctor would come around in the morning and says, "How are you today?" She'd say, "Oh, I'm feeling much better, thank you." She just said it. Then when the nurse came in and said, "How are you feeling?" "Oh, I'm really feeling good." And you know what? They discharged her in 2 days. Do you know something? It is a mental thing, because they could see, she must be getting a little bit better. She was telling herself she's getting better. And she did. And she knew that she is actually one person who I believe was taken through this experience. So she knew what it was like to get into those depths of depression. And so now she's able to help people. She's actually a counsellor, and she counsels people and brings them out of depression. And she uses what God's told her. And that's in my next talk, next time. But she just says how she just was able just to turn it around so quickly, just by thanking and praising and just resisting those morose, "So how are you?" "Oh, not too good." Instead of saying, "I am feeling fantastic. I have never felt better." And you tell yourself that, and guess what? It's going to impact in your brain. And several studies show that depressed patients with a deeper faith recover sooner than non-religious patients. Going through the forms of religion without the firm belief is of little benefit, and daily reading of Scripture is recommended for improved mental health. You learn about God and experience that God loves you. And that's the point. God loves all of us, and we've got to experience and feel that love that he has for us. And Christians definitely have an added advantage because they believe God has a plan for your life. And there's different people in the Bible who did actually go through depression. We know Elijah did. We know that Saul did, Nebuchadnezzar. And true joy is the absence of depression. So could you say in your heart you have joy in your heart? I know I have joy in my heart right now. Not every single, it's not like it's the most everything and happy is the most joyous thing in my life that has happened today, but I just do. I have a feeling of a contentment and a love, and I feel a joy that I know God loves me. I have a true peace. I have the absence of anxiety. And there is a way out. Christ promises to give you his peace. And there are ways. Now, why I wanted to share this with you, so you would have some ammunition, if I could call it that, so you can help yourself, but if you can help other people, because you're going to find people you come in contact with who need your help. You will know or meet someone who has depression, and you need to be informed so you can help them. Remember, depression can be helped. The amount of help gained is dependent on how willing the person is to change. And you know what? Satan has programmed all of our emotional responses into our minds since we were in the womb. These programmed responses have been stored in our amygdala, and given any situation, we will respond with the same memory and emotion that we experienced when we originally stored this memory. And the brain is the coordinator of emotional memories, but the memories are not actually stored there. The emotional brain, the amygdala, can delegate any place in your body to store a feeling or an emotional memory until you are ready to remember it and are ready to deal with it. You will never run out of storage space. And the only way these emotions and memories can be healed and remembered and removed is through the Holy Spirit. Now those last two slides are the ones I'm going to deal with next time. Depression can be healed. We can help it. And I believe the answer is doing everything that I was telling. It's a whole package. You just can't pick out some little bits and pieces. There's a whole package in there. You've got to get nourishment in. You've got to get exercising. You've got to get out in the sunlight. You've got to get a right mindset. You've got to get all these things right. Now, next Tuesday, the last Tuesday in this month, is the last meeting that we're going to have like this year. I'm not having any more Sunday afternoon meetings the first Sunday of the month because we've only got next month left. And next Tuesday, after this one, we're going to have lunch again, and this is our last meeting for the year. And I will do two topics that they are totally unrelated. And the only reason that I've put them like this is because a couple of people have asked me to do face cream. And face cream doesn't take long. So that's only going to take like 10 minutes or less. So I will show you how to do that. Then the other part I'm going to go into is how God forgives, cleanses and heals. Now that has got to do with those last two slides which I told you about. Getting rid of those emotions out of our amygdala. How do we get rid of those deep-seated emotions that have been planted in there, often in the womb or even in our early childhood experiences? Or maybe we've got some experience, we have, bad experience. Maybe we've had a bad experience in a marriage or something like that. And guess what? You haven't coped and you still have these problems. Well, this is how God forgives, cleanses and heals. So that's going to be my last program that we have here in this year, in this area. But next Sunday, for 4 consecutive weeks, I'm going to repeat the same health remedies that I did earlier in the year. So we're going to do poultices part 1, poultices part 2, hydrotherapy, and then herbal health. They are going to be the same as what we did last time, earlier in the year. Look, they come out a little bit different each time you do it, but basically we're covering the same material. If you want to come in, you're welcome to come. If you want to invite other people, we're welcome to come. Anybody can come. The cost is the book. If you've got the book and you don't want another one, that's fine. You just come. You don't need to have to pay anything. So I just want to get this information out, you know. I felt impressed because of what's happening in the world with all what's going on with this COVID. People need to know this. And I believe we're in for a real hard time. Something's big's going to happen next year. I really believe it. Right from the very start, at the outset, I can remember I remember watching a man who was talking about in Germany, it was in a German, and he could read German, but in German it talked about what was going to happen if a pandemic would happen. Now this was years earlier. They were projecting what would happen. And you know what? It has been uncanny. Everything that was projected all those years, I've forgotten what year, whether it was 2012 or something, but everything has run exactly as planned. And their projection was it was going to run for 3.5 years. Okay, so halfway through next year, we're going to coming up to 3.5 years. I'm just thinking, could something different going to happen? And I just want people to know, and I've got a few other places I've got to do these natural remedies too, but I want to read. So come along again if you want to. I don't mind. All the more people, even if familiar faces, that's fine. But if you feel like it won't be anything different other than what you saw the last time when you came earlier in the year. Okay, so going back, there's my website, there's my talks. All of these talks have been put on Facebook, on YouTube, on Brighteon, on Rumble. Maybe not on all of them, but we're working on that, aren't we, Ralph? Yes. I've got a super intelligent guy who knows all the computers. I know nothing about this.
Can you give me his name?
Yes, thank you, Ralph. Okay, now the other thing which I'm going to do too, what about next year? Well, I am going to do something a little bit different next year. And Tuesday, February 14th, and Sunday, February the 19th, we're going to do some cooking classes. And we're going to do them here, and we're going to get you and show you how you can cook food, and you can taste it afterwards. But look, I've got all your contact details. I'll let you know. We obviously need to know specific numbers when we do this, because we're going to teach you how to use all these foods. Then we're also planning to do a short series on Bible topics. Now that is not run by me. I'll actually be helping the guy who's doing it. I'll be talking, health and Bible topics are very closely related, because if you've got a healthy body, you need a healthy body if you want a healthy mind and a spiritual mind. So I'm going to do some talks involved in that, just a short segment in there. But as I've gone through this year, I've told you about the different things we need to be aware of. For instance, like mark of the beast, and we need to know about the time of trouble. We need to know all these things. So he's going to go right through all of those. So you can come along and just listen, okay? You'll gain incredible information from it. It's going to be intensive. He lives in Sydney, and he's going to come down. He's going to come for 2 full weeks. 3 weekends, 2 full weeks, except the Thursday. And he's going to be here in this hall. We're going to do that. And starting the last weekend in February and the first week, 10 days into March. I know you'll be very interested in it. After this, during the year, I am not sure. I'm not sure what we're going to go into. I don't know what will happen. I don't know. I'm going to wait and see. I'd like to keep the contact with you people up. I've enjoyed here, but there could be other things. I'm not sure. We don't know what we're planning to do. Somebody asked to do a Revelation seminar. We might even think of doing that too later on for those who are interested, because the book of Revelation has got some incredible symbology, and once you know what those symbols are, you can see what's going to happen in the future. It's very interesting. So that's something we're thinking of, but that leaves us to only next week. What was it, 29th, I think it was. That's the last program for this year, other than the Sunday ones, which we're going to continue going next Sunday afternoon. So you're welcome to come to which ones you'd like to come, or whatever. But anyhow, that leads us to the closer today. I'm sorry I went a little bit longer, but it always comes out different each time I do it. Thank you for that. Okay, I'll see you next time.